The sound of rustling leaves crept closer, and I could feel the air grow heavier around me as I crouched behind a gnarled tree. Panic flooded my veins with an intensity I had never experienced before. There were whispers too low to decipher, but the tone sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't breathe. I had to stay quiet, or they would find me. It all began 2 days prior, on September 3rd, 2023, when I drove to Black Hollow Woods. My friend Kyle had raved about its beauty during autumn, and after weeks of stressful work, I needed this escape. The air was crisp, the scent of pine and damp earth filled my lungs, and I felt alive as I set my camp at the base of a towering oak. Little did I know I was about to stumble into something far darker than the shadows of the trees. The first night was uneventful. I cooked some dinner, sat by the fire, and listened to the haunting silence of the woods. As night enveloped the landscape, I sat there thinking about life and work, feeling a strange sense of peace. Only the crackling of the fire accompanied my thoughts, and I marveled at how different it was from the city. The first hint of unease came when I thought I heard laughter echoing in the distance, but I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks. On the second day, I found myself hiking deeper into the woods, where sunlight barely penetrated. The trail was narrow, surrounded by dense brush that seemed alive, whispering secrets to one another. The weather turned gray and brooding by mid-afternoon, clouds rolling in like a warning. I decided to turn back as the first raindrops began to fall, but as I retraced my steps, I realized I was disoriented. By the time the rain turned into a downpour, I was completely lost. I stumbled through the woods, every tree looking the same, every path a cruel mockery of familiarity. I could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on me, and as the rain soaked through my clothes, I heard it again, whispers dancing through the trees. They seemed to call my name, a seductive melody inviting me deeper into the darkness. My heart raced, and in a rush of panic, I started running. I finally found a small clearing, and in desperation, set my eyes on a dilapidated cabin. It looked ancient, swallowed by vines and decay, yet somehow stood firm against time. I took shelter inside, wringing out my clothes as the storm raged outside. It was eerily quiet within those walls, and the musty scent of damp wood assaulted my senses. As I glanced around, I realized there was something unsettling about the place. Old photographs hung crookedly on the walls, their subjects smeared and obscured, frozen in time. I tried to calm my nerves by focusing on the storm, but the whispers came again. This time, it was clearer. They were right outside, just beyond the rotting door. I was paralyzed, alternating between the urge to flee and the curiosity to listen. The voices were indistinct, yet they felt so personal, like the forest itself was taunting me for intruding. "Help us," they seemed to say. It sent chills racing down my spine. I clutched my flashlight, flicking it on and off nervously, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. But the whispers turned to laughter, light and airy, but with an underlying malice that made my skin crawl. I backed against a rotting wall, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to leave, but as I bolted for the door, it swung shut with a deafening thud as if a hidden force were preventing my escape. Desperation took over, and I pounded on the door, my fists aching with every hit. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the cabin, drowning out the storm outside. Fear coursed through me as I realized I was truly trapped. I turned back to the dark interior, the corners swallowed by shadows. Then, suddenly, they stopped. The silence was overwhelming, and in that stillness I thought I could hear my own heartbeat. I held my breath, my ears straining for any sign of movement. And then it came, a soft tapping, like fingers drumming against wood, but it was coming from the walls. I pressed my ear against the cabin's surface, and that's when I realized the tapping was in rhythm with the whispers. Whatever was outside was communicating. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the cabin as a branch shattered against the roof. The storm was intensifying, but it felt like the weather had become a mere backdrop to the terror surrounding me. Panicking, I tried the door again. This time it opened with a shudder, and I stumbled out into the rain, disoriented and gasping for breath. But the chaos of the storm did nothing to drown out the sound of my name echoing through the trees. "Jack, Jack." I stumbled back, desperately scanning the darkness, but there was nothing. Just trees, shadows, and those whispers that now felt like they were circling me. As I ran, the whispers turned into a cacophony, growing louder and more frantic. I slipped and fell, my hands sinking into the mud. I struggled on, my mind racing, trying to remember where I had come from, where I had to go. And then I understood. They wanted me to stop. The whispers grew desperate. "Stay with us, Jack." I froze for a moment, caught between the reality of the woods and the sinister allure of those voices. But a primal instinct kicked in. I had to survive. I fought against the urge to succumb, to surrender to the beckoning voices. I pushed through the underbrush, branches scratching at my arms, their sharpness a reminder of my reality. The air felt thick with something unnatural, and I could hear the laughter again behind me, growing closer as if they were right on my heels. Finally, I broke free from the trees into a clearing, and there was the old highway, glimmering in the rain. I dashed toward it, my heart pounding as I shouted for help, but the rain swallowed my cries. In that moment, I thought of Kyle, how I had laughed at his tales of haunted woods. I looked back toward the trees, expecting to see whatever horror had tormented me, but all I saw was darkness and whispers fading into the storm. I made it to the roadside when a car finally approached, its headlights cutting through the rain. I waved frantically, desperate for rescue. The driver slowed down, and just as I felt a massive wave of relief wash over me, the car's lights flickered out. My heart dropped. No, this couldn't be happening. Then the car reversed, the driver leaning out the window. "You okay?" he shouted over the storm. I sprinted closer, the relief so close I could almost taste it. Just as I was about to reach him, the whispers returned, echoing from the woods like a menacing chorus. "Don't leave us," I froze mid-stride, my breath caught in my throat. I turned back toward the trees, but not a soul remained. Just the dark outline of the woods and the whispers that now felt like a warning. The driver shouted again, his voice mingling with the ghostly tones. "Hurry!" But the moment I stepped toward him, an overwhelming dread washed over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever awaited in the shadows was infinitely worse than being rescued. In that split second, I made my decision. I bolted back into the woods, the whispers guiding me, pulling me away from the light. The driver yelled in confusion, but I didn't turn back. The forest was familiar now, as if I had become one with the shadows. I let the whispers envelop me, feeling them wash over me like a dark tide. Knowing full well that I was no longer just an intruder, I was part of the dark legacy of Black Hollow Woods. Days later, a search party would find my campsite abandoned, fires still smoking but without a trace of me. The whispers continued, echoing through the trees, a haunting lullaby for the lost souls wandering Black Hollow Woods, and somewhere,